Thank you all so much for being here today for our tech panel on disruptive culture and the impact that startups can have on not just the tech sector, but beyond that. We have a great panel lined up for you today. I'll start off by introducing them. So to my left is Davit Bagdassarian. Davit is the founder and CEO of Krisp, AI-powered noise-canceling app that we all love and use. To his left is Hovhannes, Kuloghlyan, the CEO and one of the co-founders of Groksmith, a venture builder and startup consulting agency. So through his experience, he sees and works with a lot of different types of startups, so he has a unique perspective to share with us today. Next, we have Arik Akverdian, the founder and CEO of VCV AI. It's an HR tech startup that helps automate some of the hiring process. And then finally, we have Nerses Ohanyan. Nerses is one of the founders of HyeTech, which is an entrepreneurship and tech networking group for Armenians that started off in Silicon Valley, but has really turned into a global organization. He's also the Senior Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Veneti, a biotech startup. So guys, let's start off with sort of introducing the topic a little bit. We often hear about startups and their disruptive effect that they have on various industries. What does it mean for a startup to disrupt a sector or disrupt a space? And why are startups so uniquely good at doing that?
Sure. Well, thanks for the event. I think it's a great event. Thanks for inviting. Yeah, I mean, startups, I think, they're uniquely positioned, right? When you look at startups as an ecosystem or a cultural entity, right? To go and disrupt something, they're uniquely positioned to do that. And there are many factors to it, right? It's the culture within the company, it is the management style, and of course, it's also the technology. I mean, it is the technology that usually is the disruptive part of it. But in order to take that technology and go and challenge an existing sort of segment in the industry and disrupt it, it takes a lot of things, right? And I think, like I always tell that management style and management culture is one of the most important things that allows doing that, right? That means pace, like, you know, how fast you move, how fast you make decisions, who are the people in your team that are able to execute. And I think, like, in the technology sector in particular, the management culture and knowledge has transformed and developed so much in the last 30 years that every traditional company is going to be disrupted and not going to be able to defend themselves unless they change their management culture and processes, right? Because these companies are just very fast, right? And culturally, their teams are very different.
So it's the pace at which they move, you say, would say it's a defining factor.
The pace and the people, they're very open-minded, right? But if you're open-minded, you understand that you need to constantly learn, right? Which is, if you look at traditional business people, for example, in Armenia, like there is a stereotype that, like, the boss knows everything, right? They should know, they don't have to learn new things. But if you look at, like, the CEOs and founders and top managers in Silicon Valley and startups here in Armenia as well, right? They constantly, like, they invest so much in growing and learning, and they just embrace it, and that transforms into your team, right? At Krisp, what I was pitching, I don't know, 9 months ago, when I go look at that pitch, I'm like, is that really me? Because in these 9 months, I have learned and grown so much that this is just like, I look at it and it's unbelievable for me, right? Yeah. So that's the type of culture. I mean, it has many components to it. We can talk about that, but eventually it translates into this pace.
The pace, yeah.
Fast.
Yeah. Cool. So thanks a lot for having me here, for organizing the event, and being surrounded by these bright guys. So yeah, as Davit said, the startups are organizations specifically designed to disrupt industries. They are specifically designed to find new business models, find new ways of doing business, more efficient ways, scalable ways, and all the practices that they use to build the companies are meant to do so. So the approaches that they have, the open-mindedness, the culture of ownership, and basically all the things they do is aimed at being disruptive. So they have to be disruptive. They have limited resources. They cannot do otherwise. So if they are not disruptive, if they don't go fast, if they do not accept the reality, if they do not adapt to the reality that surrounds them, they are doomed to die. So that's why they have to be like that.
I would say all startups are about the founders, and then teams. But first of all, disruptive startup, it's about disruptive founder. So, and it's about that mindset that you see the problem and you want to solve it. So if you, I don't know, go on the street, you see the trash, you will see 10 people going and then one taking it, solving it. It's the same with startups. Many people can see the problem, but they do nothing about that. And then there is a person who sees the problem and wants to solve it. And this position, I would say it's personal skill to be disruptive. And then you build a disruptive company and you bring people who wants to make that disruption. So I would say it's more about that mindset. And of course, it's important to have right environment, because if you are in the right environment, you can use that skills to be disruptive and to build a disruptive company. So yeah, and in Silicon Valley, for example, you have that environment, and I think in Armenia, it's also becoming in tech community. You are seeing lots of good examples that you can do the same, and then you find the problem and you do the same. Yeah, I would say it's more about personal skills to be able to do that disruptive things.
Cool.
I would add that the reason that startups have to be disruptive is because the job of a startup, or the job of the founder, is to imagine a future of how the future can be, and then figure out how do you take the present to become that future. And so disruption becomes the only way to get to that future, because you have to change something to get to the way the future has to be. And that gets coupled with the fact that you can imagine the future all you want, but you don't know with certainty. I think you have to start by accepting that you can imagine it, but you still don't know, which relates to what Davit was saying, is you also have to accept the constant learning, which is why every month you're learning something that helps you imagine the future differently. And so that's why startup culture then has to be formed very differently to optimize for that function. It's disruptive by necessity. It's not because you want to be changing things. It's not, you don't want to be breaking things. It's just the only way to get to a different state of being. And the reason you have to be very focused and fast is because you can't make big change. You have to make small incremental change and find the right incremental change that has a scaling effect, and all of that has a lot of impact on how you think about things. And so a lot of what you have to invest in is mindset and thought process, and it's just technology just happens to be the tool that enables that, but what actually makes it happen is a very human
desire.
It's a human desire, it's a human skill, it's a bunch of people getting together, sharing each other's ideas and trying to articulate their vision of the future to each other, and then work together to figure out how to make that future reality. So that's how I would say disruption is sort of key to startups.
Yeah. Arik, let me ask you a question. Before founding your company, VCVAI, you worked in HR for many years, and then you identified some problems in the industry, you found solutions to them, and you built a company around that. What would you say to people who are working in various sectors today? How can they identify problems that are worth working on for them and build companies around that? Is there a methodology to it?
Yeah, so when I started to work, it was first year of my university. I was so young, and I started from entry-level position at recruitment agency. So I was doing lots of research of resumes, and then calling candidates, doing pre-screening, and then inviting them for an interview. And before meeting the candidate, I spent so much time to get that candidate to the office. And from first minutes, I saw, no, this is not the right candidate. And there was so much like energy spent just for that 3 minutes to see that it's not the right person. And I always knew that it should be in a bit different way. And then we created the pre-screening tool that helps to make it faster. But what I felt that time that I'm not able, I was so young, so I didn't believe that I can change it. When I got an experience, I got like more like confidence in me. I thought that, okay, I can change it. And I think it's important to say 3 things. First is to see the problem, because as I said, many people can face the problem, but they can't like identify that this is a problem.
Yeah.
And so yeah, to see the problem, to want to solve it, it's really important because you can see the problem. We always see other problems that we don't want to solve. And the third, which is I think the most important thing, is to believe that I can do that. And when I thought that, okay, I can change the like recruitment industry, or I can change this process, because when you are like zooming in the recruitment process, you see how many people send their CVs and they never get any feedback from a company.
Right.
So if you ask any recruiter at any company, even like Google, Facebook, etc., there are thousands of CVs that are in the inbox and they never get any response. And it's just only because the process is not like really good design, because people, human people, like human beings, they are not able to like watch every resume. And even if you get a resume, you don't see who is behind that text. So the idea of creating VCV was to have a video resume to see who is behind the text, and then to like save time on that interview processing, etc. So I would say these 3 things is really important: to see the problem, to want to solve it, and then to believe that I can do that.
Right.
If these 3 things are together, then you are able to create
Right.
something that is changing the world.
And identifying those inefficiencies in how things are currently done was
Yeah.
a really key factor. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I really want to get to how startups and the tech sector in Armenia is impacting Armenian society overall. But before we get there, let me ask a question about what industries are sort of ripe for disruption today. Is there any spaces that you guys are looking at that you're particularly excited about, that you think there hasn't been change in for a long time?
I can just
Sure.
start like a short one that because I'm about people,
Yeah.
I always think about that side. So longevity, I think it's one of the important things. So we anyway will live longer, and all tech parts that can help with that, like biotech or other things. And this is, I think, the next like 10, 20 years probably will be one of the main things, because it's about people, because we can have like
Right.
other techs, but to live like at 120 years, etc. This is might be a bit scary for now, but I think in 20, 30 years it will
Might
be
become normal.
as normal as
Yeah.
other things now.
Okay.
I would point out that one.
What about you guys?
Yeah, so I've like part-time, like very small part-time investor turned into that, right? Just recently. So I have to think about this stuff, although I don't think I'm a very mature investor yet. So like the way I think about this is, as Arik said, like founders need to see problems, right? And the way I think about it is like there are a lot of pains in the world, right? Everywhere you go, there are pains, inefficiencies, and they're around us. And there are like people that see them and try to solve them. What makes startups a bit unique is technology, right? So when we think about disruption, I think technology has a lot to play here. When there is a technology disruption happening, that's where a trend starts, right? And that technology usually is horizontal, so it impacts a lot of industries, right? You don't need technology disruption to go and build a disruptive startup. There are many, many examples of that as well. But the way I like to look at it is through the technology disruption, because I love technology, I'm a technologist. So there are certain directions, right, that are definitely already proved to be disruptive. AI is one of them, right? And it enters, everywhere, right? From biotech to voice, natural language understanding and, like predictive analytics and so on. Crypto is obviously a huge, huge space that is mostly going to disrupt financial tools and instruments that we have. It's very interesting what's happening there. VR, like metaverse and everything around it, is going to be huge. It's going to create a huge economy, right? A new economy.
Yeah.
It's already happening, not in Armenia, but in US. I think it's very, very, growing very fast. So yeah, I mean, these are the technology disruptions, and obviously, I'm not saying new things. It's publicly available knowledge, right? If you look at what are theirs, and these technologies are going to impact the industries like biotech, where drug discovery is going to be we just disrupted, like the way we think about drugs is going. And there are actually Armenian startups in that space, very, very innovative, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's.
Yeah. I would like to put accent on two specific industries that are changing our lives, or two specific areas that are changing our lives right now. So the first thing is the remote work kind of startups, because COVID changed everything in this area. And if you look at the landscape of engineering, like software developers, software engineering in Armenia, after the COVID, everything has changed. It's not the same, and people are used to work remotely right now. Though I don't believe that the future will be all remote. You cannot remove the human communication part out of
The social aspect.
Yeah, out of a lot of aspects of creating companies, creating technology, and work. So, but this is a quite important trend right now, which changes the whole industry, and especially the tech industry right now, because the like engineering talent becomes a unified, like, global market. It's not that you are an engineer in Armenia right now or you are an engineer in Dubai. It doesn't matter. If you're an engineer, you can work from anywhere in the world for a company that is located anywhere. So this is quite an important thing that changes our life right now. And the second thing is crypto, as Davit also mentioned. If you look at the economy situation right now in the world, the wars, the inflation, and everything related to it, so crypto gains importance in this ecosystem that we have right now, and people are looking at cryptocurrencies, crypto investments, and this new kind of finance industry that's developing. So this is also very important right now. And it's not that you'll have the results in 10 years. It's happening now.
Okay.
I mean, I think the general answer is everything is up for disruption still. Like agriculture is going to be disrupted, learning, education is being disrupted, space is being disrupted, like everything is being disrupted right now. And I think the way I like to think about it, and I'm not convinced that this is true, but that I have this belief that humanity is going through an evolution right now, like what it means to be a human, how we interact with information, how do we believe what's true, what do we choose to eat, who do we choose to socialize with, like all of those things are changing. You know, how we interact with our own personal data is a very important aspect. How do we as an individual interact with our data? How do our communities interact with that data? How do we keep ourselves safe? How, like that balance of safety, privacy, like all of that is evolving just because the human day-to-day life is evolving. And so I think technology is there to support it. Technology started this change of human evolution, and it's now there to support it in that phase. Because I think that evolution is unstoppable. It's going to happen. You know, we are interacting with, you know, digital things. There's a much more like shared conscious life that humans have, right? We're learning from people across the globe.
Right.
Well, like a lot of things change when that happens. Your education system has to change because information is now decentralized. You can't rely on one central institution to tell you everything you need to know, because information is being generated at pace that's faster than ever before. So as a nation, as a tribe, as a country, like how do you keep up with like what's most relevant for you? Like all of those things are changing. And so technology is being applied to support that. So I think that's the lens I would look at disruption in. It's like what supports the next way of living.
Right. Okay, let's get to Armenia. In many ways, it feels like the Armenian tech community and the tech sector is sort of a bubble in and of itself. But I think it really has some ripple effects and impacting Armenian society as a whole and culture, and especially business culture. How do you guys think about that? How do you see Armenian startups and the tech sector impacting Armenian society overall? Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I think definitely it's a bubble, right? We live in a bubble, and that's fine, right? As technologists, as entrepreneurs, we are always in a bubble. Like even like our companies are in a bubble because we always talk about the future,
Right.
the vision, and that creates a bubble by its own. Like if it's not a bubble, then you cannot disrupt it because
Right.
it's everywhere, right? So it's normal for us to live in a bubble. And so like when I look at Krisp, at some point in obviously Krisp is having a lot of impact on the society. I realize that. And I cannot measure that impact, but I'm sure it is tangible, right? And like when it started happening, it was, I think, a bit of a deliberate choice for me and Artyo, my co-founder. So we decided that we need to share more about building the company with the community, right? And when we started doing that, it was quite magical, right? The feedback was quite magical. We saw that there is so much love towards Krisp, right? People are getting so excited, and like every time we needed something from the community, it was a no-brainer for people. People would come and support us anyhow they could. So this tells me that actually there is a need for that in the community. There is a need for successful stories and narratives in Armenian community, right? And Krisp is definitely a good example of that because it's intersection of very, cutting edge AI, startup, disruption, and so on. So we do need stories like that, and definitely it's a big impact. And that has actually encouraged us to do other initiatives, right? By seeing that feedback and response. And that was one of the reasons why we were so excited to start the Big Story VC, right? Because like, okay, we have built something, and then like, how can we expand this impact, and what can we do next? Yeah. I would like bring one example from Krisp. So at some point, we started hiring interns, JavaScript interns, right? And before that, we didn't do any internships. And when we announced the internship with ACA, Armenian Code Academy, there were, I think, 1,700 people that have applied to this, right? There were like 5 or 10 positions we had. 1,700 people applied to it, right? So that's like, those are the numerical ways to measure the impact you're having, because there is so much excitement out there, and they are following you. And obviously what it translates into is parents talking about technology companies, startup future in their family environment, right? For their kids and so on. And these kids are starting to understand there is hope. There is hope in this country, and they can, make a lot of money, build billion-dollar companies and so on. So I think that's the impact that is happening. And over time, this bubble is going to grow. Yeah. And it's going to be the reality, right?
Okay.
I really have to double down on I'm proud of the bubble. Just build the bubble, grow the bubble, welcome everybody into the bubble, right? Make the bubble be what everything is, right? It's not a bubble in and out of. inside and outside. It's like create the reality you want to live in, and then get everybody to accept that and enjoy that reality. I think is a better strategy than worrying about the reality outside that bubble. It's just easier to focus on what you can.
So bringing more
influence
people
and
into the
grow. Yeah, exactly. And I think one thing to note is none of our businesses have anything to do with each other. From a business, revenue, market perspective, I mean, there's some interlap, like, obviously with VCV, we all care about talent and bringing people, but just generally from a business relationship perspective, the four of us should have nothing to do with one another, right? But what is common about the tech industry is that to be disruptive, there's a shared ways of working, which is, I think, what you're talking about. There's a huge emphasis in our community for bias for action, right? Like, just do. When you don't know what to do, the answer isn't to stop. The answer is to do until you figure out what the right thing to do. I think there's a saying that one of our advisors would say, "I would rather be wrong than confused." And I think that's a mentality and a way of working that I think that we share, right? And I think that culture is something that we hope to bring, because it's not ignorant of reality. It just accepts that reality has problems. It accepts the fact that you never have complete information. And it just says, okay, given the reality that you don't have perfect information, given the reality that you're never going to be able to resolve all of the mistakes of the past or come to like perfect, truthful conclusion about how things should be, the only way forward is figuring out how to make the thing in front of you better. How do you make incremental progress, and how do you do that? Like that shared ways of working is common across all of us, and our shared problem is how do we teach that to ourselves and to our teams? And in that, I think that's what creates that bubble, and I think that's the culture that I think we hope that becomes more prevalent, because it creates this very happy, pink-eyed bubble, whatever. But it's not an ignorant bubble. It's a very realistic, like, how do you create a resilient culture bubble? And because you realize, because we work in a global market, I think it gives us a perspective that we live in Armenia, and Armenia has particular problems, but we are also work in the world, and the world has problems. And like, if you only focus on the problems and never stop to just work and actually make progress, you can never make progress anywhere, and Armenia is no different. It just has a different set of challenges, but the mindset of how you go through it is the same everywhere. I think that's what I think we hope to bring here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you look at the tech community that we have here in Yerevan, it behaves like a kind of tribe with a shared set of values, with a shared set of approaches, and so it also proves itself to be efficient. It's not just only a bubble that you are a part of it. It also shows that it is an efficient way of living, and so there are a couple of very important things that the people in tech community share, and that affect not only their businesses, not only their technology development, but also their like day-to-day lives. And one of the things is ownership culture, not blaming the society, the others, the government, the situation, the circumstances, but just accepting the reality and trying to change it and make it your own, taking the responsibility for your situation and for your life. And this is not only about the business, but also about your life, how you interact with the surroundings and how you interact with the life around you.
Your way of thinking too.
Yeah, your way of thinking and your way of interacting with your life and everything that you have. So this is not only about tech, and it permits the society and the tech community, the employees in the startups start to think like that, and they practice this in their daily lives, and this changes the society that we have. The other thing is being grounded in the reality around you. Always checking with the things. So not go into fantasies. And at the same time have vision. So, but ground your vision in the reality that surrounds you, and make it a process, make it an iterative process, always check, always communicate with the people, ask them. So this is also very important and efficient way of thinking, and this also changed our daily lives.
Our culture.
Yeah, what I would say about the impact of tech community on Armenia, I would divide to two pieces: impact inside Armenia and impact outside of Armenia. So inside of Armenia, as I think David said, it's cool to have like role models when you are young and you see there is a successful founders who are building global startups. It means that I can do the same, or I can at least study or learn from them, like how to make it. And I think I'm not from Armenia, and what I see like last 2 years in Armenia, I think it's a huge difference in tech community and like becoming more and more, I would say, global, international level tech communities. But I think more important, it's the impact outside of Armenia as a brand of Armenia, that it's a tech-oriented country, as Israel is, or the United States, maybe Singapore, others. Because several years ago, you wouldn't like put Armenia on the tech landscape. But now when these like global companies like Mira comes to Armenia, they come because of tech community exists here, and they saw Pixar, Service Titan, Krisp, etc., and they thought, okay, we are also coming to Armenia. It's not only about the place to live; it's also about the place to hire people, exchange knowledge, to be able to give something to community. And I think the impact for the tech community makes a really huge impact on Armenia on a global level in front of investors. So we're having a big conference here. Lots of investors from other countries coming here, and they want to meet Armenian startups, and they want to invest because they have that examples that startups in Armenia can build a global company. So I think it all, like there is a butterfly effect. So when you do something small and it makes something huge in several years, this is what's going on now in Armenia with tech community.
I want to just before we move off the topic, a couple of things come to mind. I think the tech community has taken advantage of an interesting property of Armenians, which is that we are globally distributed.
Yes.
Like the Armenian tech community, we talk about the Yerevan or the Armenian tech community, but the Armenian tech community is not really separate from the Armenian global tech community. In fact, it's almost indistinguishable. Like you can go to a coffee shop in multiple countries and multiple cities, see about the same people, and you can never know who's from where originally or who spent how. Like it's become very sort of amorphous in that way, which is fantastic. So I would say it's like a globalized Armenian tech community now that exists, and I think that's a unique property that's bringing that, what it means to be Armenian, not just tech, just what it means to be Armenian, and being Armenian is a global nation. I think that's become inherent to tech, and I think that's a way of thinking and living and connecting with each other that's brought. I think it's kind of exposed that the fact that we're dispersed has some unique advantages, has some unique value that, when applied correctly, can actually add a lot of value to each individual and to the group itself. And the second thing that comes to mind, unrelated, but I think still very important, is tech expects failure. The startups, the math, the failure is built into the investment math.
It's an option.
It's literally like, we know 9 out of 10 are going to fail, right? That's why we expect big vision, because we're just, expecting that one person to fail, to succeed big enough to make up for all the failures. In fact, recession is when a lot of great startups come out of it, actually, because the necessity forces you to work on the right ideas. And everybody talks about the dot-com bust, for example, but out of all those failures is the reason we had the biggest success in technology. Google came out of that, right? Like, which has 100x the value of like all of the lost investment. And so I think resilience and failure tolerance is also part of the culture that comes with it, which I think translates into all of the other ways that people live their lives. And like, it talks about ownership and responsibility. It's, failure tolerance is expected to be a professional skill set that just becomes a character trait as a person, right? I think it takes years for that to kind of go from a skill set to be a personal attribute.
Yeah.
But once it gets there, it permeates the team, and I think that's a societal change that we hope is useful. It's a utility.
How do you guys think about the role of media in telling the story of tech in Armenia? What is important to you to get across to the general public?
Yeah, we were just talking about that, like the installation we have here with the videos. I think it's pretty cool, but it's it's a bit depressive as well. It reflects too much of the reality, and because we live in a bubble, and so there are a lot of good things happening in the country that I think that media can cover more, right? And why would they do that? Is because of the same reason that I, as a CEO at Krisp, must talk about the future a lot in our company. Like if we get into the reality, it might be devastating because of all the challenges we have every day in the company. But what brings everyone together is the vision, right? The vision and the future. And what the impact that we are having. So my job is to talk about that a lot, right? In fact, we have a company meeting in 2 weeks, and I'm working on our vision document that I'm going to present, and I think that's super important. So in a scale of country, like if the media talks about the reality all the time, obviously the story becomes the reality, and it's very depressing, right? And if we have an opportunity to talk about the future, right? Like let's take the satellite. Like so many people got excited about this fact, right? Because there is a need for that. There is a need for good stuff, future stuff, exciting stuff, and a hope. And so it boils down to the narrative that you are selling to or like creating for the nation, right? Is it and media has a huge role in that, right? So and the right incentives must be created for the media also to invest in that and create that narrative. Because I believe if you do that, it is going to unite, especially the new generation, right? They're going to start talking about this, the vision and future, and they're going to convert into this bubble way faster, right? So families are going to talk about that, which is probably like the most important thing, like what families talk within, when they have a dinner. I mean, that's so anyway, I think the media has a very important role in this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, so if you look at the absolute numbers of people involved in tech business in Armenia, it's still a small part of the society. But this small part of society makes a lot of change. And it also offers an alternative kind of thinking, alternative approach to life. It's not based on motivation of fear, so it's more of like, let's build things, let's live better. There is a hope, and the part of media here is to create that narrative, to show that there is an alternative way of thinking. Not the whole thing is doomed to bad end. So there's hope, and I think it does its job, and people are looking at startups and technology right now as a kind of hopeful way of becoming successful, fulfill their lives, and realize their potentials. So this is the role of media to show that there's an alternative way of thinking and alternative life, and it's not just a bubble. It's not just some fantasy. It's a real efficient working mechanism that you can part of.
Yeah.
So if we talk about media in general, I think people trust media less. I think this trust between media and people, it's last 5 years probably. It's becoming less because we saw lots of examples when media is used for some needs or reasons. And also there is another trend that everyone can become a media. and these bloggers or like podcast is growing a lot, and you can become a media. And when you know the person, so I trust a person who is doing a podcast more than, I don't know, some media that is covering some news. So my vision to media, it's of course it's a big role, and we know that it's like one of the main things now in like information war and everything. But I think like media more turning towards like personalized media. So when the blogger or the influencer can
Yeah.
be a media, even more maybe having more influence on the society or on the audience than like actual media. So I would call media like widely debated to bloggers as well.
Yeah.
And it's cool that it's the entrance to that market. It's easy with this all social media, Twitter, YouTube, etc. Because in the past, I think it was too hard. You need a team of, I don't know, writers. You need some money to publish, etc. Now it's cheap, it's free, and yeah. So if we consider media with all this audience, bloggers, etc., I would say that the trust towards bloggers it's really high. And if you do advertisement, you see that it works better through bloggers
Yeah.
than through media. So yeah, it has anyway a big role and a big impact on all societies. But I think we see that switch and twist through from
Yeah.
traditional media to the social media.
Okay.
Yeah, what I would focus on for me is I think with technology, I think the intuition is always to focus on the technology itself or the market and all that. But when you look at the technology community, it's all about people, right? It's all about investing in people, mindset, ways of thinking, all of that. And I think the belief that a small group of people can make change. And I think media can do a good job like humanizing the technology sector so that people can understand that they can be in that position.
Yeah.
You know, because we're also inspired by stories that we've learned, you know, from storytelling from others. I personally love to tell the story about AUA. It inspires me greatly because like we look at, you know, I grew up in Armenia when I was a child and AUA existed, right? And then you kind of take it as this institution that's there. But what it was a few individuals, right, during the Soviet Union who just traveled to Armenia from California, from San Francisco, and were like, we're gonna put a university here that's gonna bring the American way of thinking to Armenia, right? We're gonna give people the option to have access to this way of thinking. It wasn't 1,000 people, it wasn't some major organization, it wasn't some initiative it was just a few people who came and were like, we're gonna get this building and we're gonna do this legal thing and we're gonna, you know, talk to these people, we're gonna teach this class and we're gonna do this, right? And like, think about the impact that small group of people with that vision has had on Armenia. The fact that like, just people walk on the street and they see, you know, just the school and the Arzan and like all of that, right? Just that like, okay, and that happened from just a few people,
Yeah.
right? That humanizing element of like, how did this institution come to be is really important because the institution has just as much importance as the story behind it. And the fact that you can make the next institution, and it doesn't take, you know, some crazy thing to make that happen. It creates, you know, just your vision, believing in it, taking the risk, and accepting the fact that it might not work, because when it does, it's amazing. And when it doesn't, we're not sitting here talking about all the failures of people who've tried to do it didn't happen. We only talk about things that did happen, and that's fine. And it's okay to fail and disappear into obscurity for the rare opportunity to make that change. And I think that's I think what media can do, is to talk about how some great things that you kind of assume just happened by some larger force actually happened by people who probably grew up right next to you.
Yeah.
And you can be that person too.
Yeah.
I think that's where
Obviously, the last 18 to 20 months have been extremely difficult for Armenia, and that's a story and a narrative that much of media till this day focuses on, as it needs to be. But it's also true that the last 18 to 20 months have been some of the most successful for Armenia's tech sector and Armenian startups. And I've always thought of startups as sort of your way of participating in doing something in society by implementing your solution and bringing it to market and telling that story to Armenian society so that young people are motivated and inspired to participate in that way, I think is extremely important. Okay, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you guys so much for coming on and talking about these important issues. And thank you all for being here.